All right, well, welcome back, everyone. Pleased to have you join us for the next group of presentations. Hope you are geared up. I know my mind is buzzing with all of the information that we've received so far. I want to welcome you to the Faculty Engagement and WIL session that we'll be having over the next 25 minutes. And I'd like to introduce my co-presenters. First of all, we have Pam Kinda. She's the acting manager of VCC Partnership Development Office. VCC stands for Vancouver Community College. She's the also a team instructor at VCC and a continuing studies instructor, career studies instructor at Simon Fraser University, career development practitioner program. And she's a certified career development practitioner through the BCCDA or BC Career Development Association. We have lots of acronyms today, that's for sure. Also on with her team is Rachel Warwick. Rachel is the VCC Career Lab lead and program coordinator. She leverages her expertise in post-secondary interdepartmental collaboration to encourage faculty and staff to embed contemporary career and WIL theory and practice into the career guidance provided to VCC students. As well as 15+ years in post-secondary admin, she has experience in career services, television production, marketing, and community living. Rachel has an MA in leadership from Royal Roads and is the VCC rep on the BC WIL Council. And for myself, I am the WIL Abilities Coordinator and faculty instructor at the Co-op and Career Development Center at Langara College. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've been designing and delivering youth programs for focusing on entrepreneurship, community building, and youth development for a very long time. While I was department chair here at the Co-op and Career Development Center, I managed traditional co-op programs and then also new post-degree internship programs. And I also helped to evolve the program or the department from just co-op to Co-op and Career Development Center. I contribute to the broader community, volunteering on various committees and board roles with ACE-WIL BC, CWIL Canada, and I'm also the incoming chair of the BC WIL Council. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Can I interrupt for a moment? If you want to stop sharing and then I can pull up the presenter view.
Oh, did I make a mistake there? Oh. Got it?
How's that, everyone?
Great. Thanks, Rachel.
Terrific.
Sure.
So Heather, do you want to take it away? Thank you for that great info.
I will. Well, so Vancouver Community College and Langara, we are the same, but we are different as well. So how are we the same? Well, we actually used to be one in the same campus, one in the same school. And then we decided to expand, as schools tend to do. The Langara site was opened in 1970. And then in 1994, we decided to split as two independent schools. And technically, Langara became the academic school and VCC became the applied school. But as you'll hear moving forward, that we have lots of both as well. The other piece that we're quite the same about is that WIL tends to happen within programs or within areas of study. It doesn't really happen outside of official WIL areas, and that can be a bit challenging. But we also are in the process of expanding our definitions and conceptions of WIL. So we're looking at how we talk about WIL, how it's perceived on our campuses, how people view it, and trying to help people look at it a little bit differently.
Great, thanks, Heather. Yeah, there's I mean, what's interesting, we found interesting is thinking about, because we were one institution, and then how this split has maybe impacted how we then conceive of WIL. So how we're different is VCC students really come primarily to be trained for a career, to get a job. So it really resonated to me this morning, hearing that conversation about that pathway to employment and how critical that is, particularly often in a college setting, in terms of WIL. Whereas at Langara, you know, conceptually, students for the most part would come to be in school, to be those academic students. 75% are focused on university transfer. And of course, I mean, VCC does have university transfer, Langara does have applied skills. So this is more of a generalization. And it's particularly important in how it relates to WIL. So, and at WIL, at VCC, WIL is completely decentralized. So we have no WIL or co-op office. We have no career center. It is entirely developed, designed, delivered, completed by the teaching departments themselves, often in their own particular, sometimes almost in a silo. And whereas at Langara, a lot of the WIL is coordinated through the co-op career office, but there of course are some standalone WIL programs such as nursing, early childhood education, applied research, that sort of thing. So how we deliver WIL, as I talked about a little bit, we kind of thought about these two sort of themes about at VCC. We're a little bit outside the traditional WIL box. So part of that is our decentralized model. WIL is a required component within most of the applied skills training programs, which is, it's either a course or it's just part of what they need to do typically at the end of a program. And it's very integrated. So it's really integrated into curriculum. So that means that it's just one of the many courses students will take in our typically cohort-based applied skills programming. So it's really non-optional. There is no opportunity to say, I'm going to kind of pause my studies, take a WIL placement, come back to my studies. It is just part of the required, part of getting either that certificate or diploma, or sometimes their licensing. And they tend to be short and almost entirely unpaid placements, because again, they really are intended conceptually in many ways to be a pathway to employment. So they're at the end of a program. Students are sometimes training for relatively entry-level skills, beginning type. So it's almost a way to transition into almost a screening process for hiring, so that the goal is ideally for students to get hired right out of their placement, and many do, not unlike what was mentioned in the CICAN information. That's certainly been our reality, is the success rates of it are very high. People really appreciate our WIL, both employers and students, and there is a lot of hiring that actually comes out of that. Heather, talk about Langara.
Sure. So as I mentioned here, that we kind of tend to deliver our WIL in the traditional WIL boxes. So we're actually the first college in British Columbia to offer cooperative education. So that started way back in 1982. And so we're heavy on co-op, but we have a number of professional practicums, applied research, field schools, work experience, internships, community service learning, and entrepreneurship. I'd love to tell you that we have robust opportunities in all of these areas. That's not the case, but we are interested in adding and looking at providing more opportunities for students. The paid co-ops and internships typically happen out of our department, and we do a lot of work outreach to employers to talk about, these are the wage subsidies that are available. There's fantastic students available, whether they're students that have come right out of high school, or we have students, of course, as with all the rest of you, that have come after another career or from another country. So we work really hard to line up any of those students with these employers and making them understand kind of that have students available all the time. Let me just move to maybe the next screen there, just looking at the time here.
Yeah, so thinking about how the faculty connect to WIL, and we've done, actually my colleague, Pam, is this one you're speaking to? I can't remember. Great, I will let you take it away. Pam has, you're muted, Pam. So because she is, Pam led a bit of a research project we did through some of the funding we received through the provincial government on our faculty, and how do they conceive of WIL, especially because they tend not to be WIL practitioners in the traditional sense.
Thank you, Rachel. I am very happy that you continue, and I'll just jump in, but since you have given me the floor, I will take it away. So yes, I had the great privilege of actually doing the research interviews with the faculty, along with Dr. Candy Ho, and that's when we got to understand a little bit about how WIL is sort of run here at VCC. As Rachel said, we are an applied college. Everything is pretty much with the lens of occupation-specific training. So there's tons of experiential learning happening here at the college as well. And examples include, actually, when you walk downstairs, you will see customers coming in to the salon wanting to get their hair done, wanting to get aesthetics done from our students. So it's very much like a place where students do a lot of hands-on experiential learning here at the college, and then they get out to the workplaces. So majority of the time you can see that about 90% is hands-on, whether it's through experiential learning, whether it's through the WIL platform. So how faculty relates to WIL is typically like before we started the interviews, we had this understanding that most of the WIL practitioners have a career development background. But we were surprised to see that's not the case, but also very pleasantly surprised to see that the WIL lens that our faculty uses is based on their prior experiences, their subject matter expertise. They're very connected to the field already. They continue to stay connected to the associations. And also most of them actually have had either gone through the same program, they've gone through the WIL, they've actually hosted students, they've supervised, they've mentored students. So their WIL teaching is very much informed by their sector expertise, their own personal experiences as well. So even though my initial thinking was you need to have career development background to be able to be a great WIL practitioner, those myths were basically taken out of the window that no, these incredible faculty members provide such a great experience to our students that they are so very ready to jump into a workplace as soon as they're done here. Also, there's a huge engagement with the industry throughout. The programming involves the very, very active engagement where actually there are days where employers come and they do interviews on site, where they kind of provide information about how to prepare for WIL. So there's a huge sector engagement throughout that too. So that's where the faculty is pretty connected to the industry that the training is focused on. And just to add, we have actually 2 restaurants here that are open to public where students serve. So it is very much with the extension of experiential learning that goes into the WIL when students are out and about. I think Lengara, Heather, you want to talk about how that
I'm
works?
ready. Yeah, so how do faculty connect with WIL? Obviously, in a lot of ways. So one of the things that I'm really pleased about is that we've gone through a whole process here at Langara looking at what is our WIL strategy, and we're building that strategy right now. And we've done a number of consultations, but one of the points that has really been clear is that the leadership has said that it's an institutional goal that every student has the opportunity to participate in some type of WIL before they leave Langara. You know, that can be quite challenging because, as I mentioned, we're a large university transfer school. In actuality, about 75% of our students will transfer on to other colleges or universities throughout the province and beyond. So, you know, being able to capture students and giving them an opportunity, either if they're here with a semester or a year or 2 years, is a bit of a challenge. So we're in the process right now of identifying specific courses that are available for students to take that aren't necessarily restricted to cohorts, for example, but have WIL components in them. The other piece, if I didn't mention, don't think I did, is that our 2025 strategic plan clearly identifies 3 WIL goals. And again, that really helps to make the case and really solidify that focus for us as a campus. So we're looking at the percentage of FTE students enrolled in programs that have a WIL embedded in the curriculum. We're looking at the number of students participating in WIL each year. And then we're also looking at the percentage of co-op employers who rate our students as very good to outstanding. So I'm really pleased about that. Then another project that I've been working on out of our department is that we've developed a couple of workshops for other faculty. So we're faculty here in the Co-op and Career Development Center, and we created 2 workshops. The first one is what is WIL? So background on WIL and the background methodology. And then the second one is how to willify your course. So basically, how do you insert will into courses that you already have? So, I'll talk a little bit more about what those might look like. But, those workshops have gone very well and have increased the amount of will opportunities that happen within the course level. Next slide, there we go.
Great. So yeah, we thought we'd kind of introduce some ideas, some thinking about some of the implications from will and maybe what can be kind of gleaned from our sort of little mini case study of, and so from a VCC lens, really one of the things maybe we've been struggling with is how we can maybe introduce more paid will opportunities. For example, co-op. I know there's at least one conversation, maybe two, at the college about introducing will, but part of the challenge is because everything tends to be cohort based, it's deeply curricular based, is that it really means redesigning an entire program. So I mean, in fact, even just that little terminology, will program is we don't have that at our school. In fact, I'll give one example of how will is almost ubiquitous. It's in almost every applied skills program. But I remember talking to one of our faculty who I was saying, well, what kind of will? And the answer was, we do not have will. I said, but your students go out on placements. This was actually for some mandatory practicums. They said, but that's part of the program. Like that's part of licensing for this particular profession. So even conceiving of will is something that is a program in and of itself, really does not resonate well with it in a lot of our areas and in a lot of our people that are actually practicing will quite successfully. So, and the other part of it is that, yeah, and part of that is because often our faculty, our instructors who deliver the will, conceptualize and deliver it through that industry specific lens. So not unlike that example where if in the health professions, people in their training need to go through these standard regularized, regulated placements and be supervised in a particular way within the health industry sector, then it's not seen so much as something separate then. And part of that then is to, would be almost actually a message I think that is being talked about a little bit today. I heard it be spoke about this morning about us thinking about will a little bit more expansively in order to make it resonate or make it applicable to this kind of more decentralized, more organic, deeply curricular types of will that is highly industry informed. So I know some of the challenges for us, even in terms of accessing funding, is the, I believe Denise mentioned it this morning and it was music to my ears about, but the term-based structure of will is often an assumed structure, and that's not how will is typically delivered for us. They're short, it doesn't really follow a term structure. It's not as easy for us to just add great fundings available for this next term because it needs to be a whole rejig of a curriculum. So yeah, those are some of the implications. I could talk a lot more about them, but like Heather, if you want to.
Sure. So, as I mentioned earlier, we kind of at Langara tend to think in the boxes of will, and we operate in our departments and operate very well and meet the requirements for clinical practicums and all those kind of things. But, with this infusion of money from the provincial government, it's just really allowed us to think more broadly about will. And it actually gave me permission. I know that sounds silly to say, but I actually had a moment to stop what I was doing and look at what is possible and, step away from co-op so that I could kind of look more broadly and connect with all my other great colleagues that are doing so many amazing things in other programs. And then plus, the infusion of the iHub monies also really helped us kind of be more creative and think more collaboratively, even within our campus. So that was really great. And then, I mentioned we developed these 2 workshops and we deliver these workshops. So one of the community partners we deliver the workshops with is City Studio Vancouver, and they're kind of spreading across the country, but it's accessing projects within the city of Vancouver as sources for projects with our students. So we can embed those kind of major projects within the programming that's already happening. So that's quite exciting. And then the other, thing to note, of course, is, willifying courses or opening up our minds to some of these different ways of looking at sharing WIL with students. It really does take some time and energy, plus funding definitely helps, especially as we're all trying to regroup after COVID. And then also willingness to shift, not just structurally on your campus, but also a willingness to shift with other faculty that are kind of wanting to look at this way of doing things. So it's been lovely to have the permission to do this kind of thinking with this funding.
Can I add one little comment before we jump into the last one there, just because it made me think about, part of it is, I appreciate you saying willifying takes time, energy, and funding. It takes staffing too. So, what's unique at VCC, as I mentioned, we don't have a co-op office, we don't have a career center. So I'm an administrator. I lead an initiative called Career Lab, where our goal is to work with the faculty and staff that provide work integrated learning and career guidance to our students to try and connect them to some of the resources, the theory, the funding even, but it takes even more staffing to then be able to work with the faculty. And sometimes, often for us, either the funding isn't significant enough to be able to rationalize hiring enough staffing. Not always the case. Often it is quite significant for that. So speaking of funding, so as had been mentioned by Jenny, that BC provincial government had done some really interesting funding that allowed many of us across the province to take on a lot of initiatives. And I won't go through all the details here in the stuff for VCC, but it was really impactful for us because it allowed us to sort of take inventory. We did a scan, we did our faculty research, we were able to have more conversations about it. I feel like we're on the very early stages of better raising the profile of WIL, or even the concept of WIL at our institution, but the funding certainly allowed us to take great strides towards that.
Yes, and just as I mentioned here, it just gave us permission to think beyond existing WIL formats and really helped us look beyond. Someone asked in the questions about how do we encourage the institution to build WIL into the plan and engage senior leadership with WIL. Well, I'll tell you, the funding sure helps raise profile and get people's awareness, whether it's federal, provincial funding. And as I said, I had a moment to step aside from what I normally do, which I love doing, but to be creative and to think outside of the box and to reach out to other colleagues on campus who we are all in silos. We all operate doing our things with our students for so long that it was a real gift to be able to have this time. And right now I'm demonstrating a WIL abilities coordinator position. So I'm working directly with our abilities office and directly with students, and really on a one-on-one basis in a way that we hadn't kind of collaborated before. So it's really quite great. Let me just see what other question is there. What's the format or details of the 2 faculty courses on WIL at Langara? Well, I've been trying a few different things. The What is WIL course, we did the delivery of the content, and then we had kind of a sandbox session afterwards. And then the next Friday we had What is WIL content, and then a sandbox session after that. And that's all lovely, but lots of people didn't have time for the sandbox sessions. So what we did move to is a format, a 90-minute format that I did in conjunction with that community partner I was talking about, City Studio Vancouver. And we kind of said, well, this is how other colleagues on our campus are using this resource for a source for projects or source for major projects within a class. Here's how you could do that too. And so we literally got the list of projects. We had the person from City Studio, and we literally walked through a couple of examples. We had people sharing ahead of time which course that they were thinking about inserting a WIL project within. So that really helped. And we've been asked to create a community of practice as well around that. So, City Studio Vancouver is one partner that we deal with. It's a great partner, but it's not the only community partner that we have. Let me just see, what have I missed here?
Can I make
Yeah.
Quick comment about that question about WIL goals and institutional strategic plan. And I will say it's partly just how we're situated at VCC that, there isn't a significant amount of uptake on prioritizing WIL and from an institutional level necessarily. And that is partly because it's already worked so well. So given that there's so many priorities, so many needs that we focused on, it's not necessarily seen as something that should be a top priority because there are so many other factors. But, and so kind of how we've been approaching it with when we do have funding opportunities and want to try and encourage that is a little bit of that ground up. So working with the teachers directly and showing and being able to demonstrate the benefits of it, really, again, taking that educational focus about how it benefits student learning, how it benefits their employment, pathway to employment goals, which is really what many of our students in applied skills, that's really what they're looking for. So it's a little bit of a why fix it if it's not broken. And yeah, as Heather mentioned, the funding does help if there is kind of enough of it. I know there's been some discussions I've had with some folks that said, well, if you can bring me money to get enough staff or to relieve my staff so they can work on this, sure, we can talk. But until then, I have such limited resources that it's just not a top priority. So I think it's a bit of a bottom up as well as a top down, and then trying to leverage funding where possible.
Yeah.
May I just quickly add one thing? We did, when we were doing research, we did a focus group as well. And that was the first time all the faculty came together. And it was incredible because they said, we haven't done this. We just work within silos. We do our thing, but this is what we want. So they had like the biggest desire out of the research was a couple of things were, one, we want to have a community of practice where we can actually share ideas, learn from each other. And the other was to have more clear understanding of like guiding principles from the institutional level. So there's definitely room for us to sort of work with the faculty and bring them together so that people are not having to create new resources because they already exist. As soon as you work with the others, you know that somebody's already done it. So there's certainly room and appetite for that.
Yeah, I would say our provincial funding, we had a number of provincial projects that we did for everyone. Like we did a huge tech review. So we reviewed all the technology that we're using, the software and stuff on our campuses so that we could compare and people could see if you were a one-person shop versus a 70-person shop, who's using what and what tools work for what. So that was valuable. We have a number of our projects that are open source on our ACE-WIL website as well. And our Indigenous Employer resource hub we just talked about that yesterday, is really rich with fantastic materials, not only for our students, but also so that we as practitioners can use with employers as well. So really amazing tools and results that came out of that funding for sure, that we are sharing most of it for sure. There's a few little things behind the membership only screen, but take a look at the website for ACE-WIL BC and you can see a number of our projects there. I'm just looking at the time here. Can you stop sharing for a moment, Rachel, please?
Yeah, and I see there's a question.
Oh,
other than the pay, if there's any difference between co-op and WIL.
Other than the student being paid.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that there's probably a lot of other differences. Co-op has some very robust structure around it. From what I understand, again, we don't have co-op, whereas my experience WIL, which is we have then. Well, and actually, I think there's the debate as co-op is a part of WIL. So again, how we use our terminology is important. So in fact, sometimes I find it a challenge that co-op is considered a part of WIL when it's often referred to in different ways as two separate things. But for us, because we don't have co-op and yet we do have a few paid programs that do have paid placements, but they are just structured a little bit differently. They're not term-based. They don't have the same kind of rigor necessarily on paperwork and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, or at least they're not accredited type programs.
So please feel free to reach out to the three of us if you have any questions afterwards. I'm really pleased to be able to share with you today. And I believe we're getting ready for emerging research.